October 14, 1940. Piccadilly, London. Walter Thompson stood beneath the entrance canopy of the Ritz Hotel, rain drumming against the canvas above his head. His eyes moved across faces in the crowd, a habit formed over 15 years of keeping men alive when the world wanted them dead. The air smelled of wet wool and petrol fumes. Somewhere in the darkness above, German bombers droned toward the Thames. Thompson was 48 years old. A Scotland Yard detective assigned to protect Winston Churchill since 1921. He had stopped 3 assassination attempts, prevented 4 kidnappings, learned to read danger in the angle of a shoulder, the weight of a glance. Tonight he was waiting for Churchill to finish dinner with American journalists, selling the war, begging for weapons, playing the charming bulldog while London burned. Thompson's hand rested near his Webley revolver. Not tense, just there, the way a carpenter's hand rests near his hammer. Across the street, beneath the awning of Swan and Edgar department store, a man in a gray overcoat watched the Ritz entrance. His name was Klaus Richter. He was 32 years old. He had arrived in London 6 months earlier with forged Swedish papers identifying him as a timber merchant. He was Abwehr, German military intelligence. His orders were to monitor Churchill's movements, identify patterns, report vulnerabilities. Richter had been doing this work for 11 months. First in Belgium, then France, now England. He was good at it. Patient, observant, invisible. But tonight something was different. Thompson's eyes found him, held him. The detective didn't move, didn't signal, just looked. Richter felt the recognition like a physical touch. After 3 months of watching from crowds and doorways and coffee shop windows, he had finally been seen. He turned and walked away. Not running. That would confirm suspicion. Just walking. Collar up. Hands in pockets. Thompson watched him go. Noted the gait. The height. The way the man's right shoulder dipped slightly with each step. He would remember this. The rain continued. The bombers passed overhead. Churchill emerged from the Ritz smelling of brandy and cigars, still talking to journalists who followed him to the car. Thompson opened the door. Scanned the street. The gray-coated man was gone. But Thompson knew he would see him again. For the next 6 weeks, Thompson saw the gray-coated man 17 times. Outside the war rooms. Near Chequers. At the railway station in High Wycombe. Always at a distance. Always disappearing before Thompson could act. Churchill noticed nothing. He was occupied with the Battle of Britain, the Atlantic convoys, the endless meetings that stretched past midnight. Thompson was occupied with keeping him alive. On November 29th, Thompson followed the gray-coated man. It was evening. Churchill was dining with Roosevelt's envoy at Claridge's. Thompson had 2 hours. He waited outside the hotel until he saw the familiar figure across Berkeley Square. Then he walked. The man led him through Mayfair into Soho, down narrow streets where bomb damage created new shortcuts through collapsed buildings. Thompson stayed 50 yards back. Professional distance. The man stopped at a boarding house on Greek Street. Paused at the door. Then turned and looked directly at Thompson. Neither man moved. The street was empty. Fog rolled between them. Somewhere a cat knocked over a dustbin. The man in the gray coat spoke first. His English was perfect, but something in the cadence was wrong. You've been following me for 3 blocks. You've been following Churchill for 3 months, Thompson replied. The man almost smiled. 14 weeks. Not 3 months. Who are you? Does it matter? Thompson's hand moved toward his revolver. It does if you're planning to kill him. I'm not. The man said this calmly as if discussing the weather. I'm observing. Reporting. That's all. For whom? The man studied Thompson's face. He seemed to be calculating something. Risk. Advantage. Trust. Berlin, he said finally. Thompson should have arrested him. Should have whistled for the constable on Shaftesbury Avenue. Should have followed protocol. Instead he asked, "Why are you telling me this?" The man in the gray coat, Richter, though Thompson didn't know his name yet, tilted his head slightly. Because you've caught me 3 times this week and done nothing. Because you could have had me arrested 17 days ago outside Chequers, but you watched me leave. Because I think you're curious why a German spy would risk his life to stand in the rain and watch an old man smoke cigars. Thompson said nothing. Richter continued. And because if you were going to shoot me you would have done it already. The fog thickened. The cat finished with the dustbin and disappeared into an alley. Thompson made a decision that would haunt him for the rest of his life. There's a pub on Frith Street. The Dog and Duck. Tomorrow night at 8. Come alone. Why? Because I'm curious too. They met 7 times over the next 5 weeks. Always different locations. Always after dark. Never more than 30 minutes. Thompson told himself he was gathering intelligence. Running an asset. Turning a German spy into a British informant. But that wasn't true. And he knew it. What he was doing was talking to someone who understood the same thing he understood. That war made men into functions. Bodyguard. Spy. Soldier. Pilot. Roles that reduced you to a single purpose while the human parts atrophied in darkness. Their first conversation lasted 14 minutes. Thompson asked questions. Richter answered some. Deflected others. Neither man trusted the other, but both men recognized something familiar in the silence between words. How long have you protected Churchill? Richter asked. Since 1921. With gaps. That's a long time to watch one man. It's the job. Richter nodded. Sipped his beer. Do you believe in what he's fighting for? Thompson considered the question. In 19 years of protecting politicians, no one had asked him this. I believe someone has to stop Hitler. Whether Churchill is the right man for it. He shrugged. I just keep him alive long enough to find out. That's honest. What about you? Thompson leaned forward. Do you believe in what you're doing? Richter was quiet for a long time. Outside the pub window, searchlights swept the night sky. The wail of air raid sirens rose and fell. I believed in Germany, Richter said finally. I believed we had been humiliated after the First War. That we deserved restoration. I believed Hitler when he said we would reclaim our dignity. He stared at his beer glass. I stopped believing in 1938 when they burned the synagogues. But by then I was already in the Abwehr. Already trained. Already useful. And useful men don't get to quit. Thompson understood. The machinery of state doesn't care about your doubts. It only cares if you still function. Why not defect? Thompson asked. My mother is in Dresden. My sister is in Hamburg. The Gestapo knows where they live. Richter's voice was flat. If I defect they die. So I write reports about Churchill's movements that Berlin mostly ignores because they're too busy losing the war to care what one man does. And I tell myself this is different than firing an artillery shell into a crowded city. It's not. But I tell myself it is. Thompson had no response to this. What do you say to a man trapped by the same machinery that traps you? That war makes everyone complicit? That there are no clean hands? The air raid sirens stopped. The all clear sounded. They finished their beer in silence. As they prepared to leave, Richter asked, Will you arrest me? Thompson should have said yes. Not yet. Why not? Because talking to you is the first honest conversation I've had in 20 years. Because you're the only person who understands what it means to watch history happen from 3 feet away while having no power to change it. Because in a city of 8 million people, you're the only one who sees me as something other than Churchill's shadow. Thompson said none of this. Because I want to know what you're reporting to Berlin. Richter almost smiled. That Churchill drinks too much, sleeps too little, and will probably die of a heart attack before the Luftwaffe can kill him. Is that true? The drinking and sleeping? Yes. The heart attack. Richter shrugged. Probably. But he'll finish the war first. Men like Churchill don't die until their work is done. December brought heavier bombing. The Blitz intensified. Whole streets disappeared overnight. Thompson spent 60-hour weeks moving Churchill between bunkers and safe houses while Richter dutifully filed reports that said nothing and changed nothing. They met twice in December. Once in January. The conversations grew longer. More personal. Thompson learned that Richter had studied architecture before the war. That he loved Brahms and hated Wagner. That he had been engaged once to a Jewish girl named Sarah before the laws made such things impossible. She had fled to America in 1936. He never heard from her again. Richter learned that Thompson had a wife named Kate who worried constantly. 2 daughters he barely knew because protection duty kept him away for months at a time. A garden in Surrey he hadn't visited in 3 years. Do they understand? Richter asked. Your family. Do they understand why you're never there? They understand it's duty. Whether they forgive me for it. Thompson shook his head. Kate says I love Churchill more than I love them. She's wrong. But I can't explain why. I don't think she'd believe me if I could. You don't love Churchill, Richter said quietly. You love the idea that protecting one man matters. That your vigilance has meaning. That if you do this one thing correctly, it justifies all the other failures. Thompson stared at him. How do you know that? Because it's the same lie I tell myself about my reports. That writing down Churchill's schedule and sending it to Berlin means something. That I'm still serving Germany even though Germany has become something I don't recognize. That if I keep doing my duty, it absolves me from asking if my duty is worth doing. They sat in silence. Around them, the pub filled with off-duty soldiers and munitions workers trying to forget the war for an hour. No one noticed 2 men in the corner who were speaking about things that couldn't be spoken. What happens when the war ends? Thompson asked. If Germany wins, I go home and pretend I believe in the victory. And if Germany loses? Richter was quiet. Then I'm a war criminal. A spy who failed. A man who watched his country commit atrocities and did nothing. I'll be hanged or shot or I'll spend the rest of my life pretending to be Swedish in some quiet place where no one asks questions. You could defect now. MI5 would take you. Turn you. Use you. And my mother and sister would be dead before Christmas. There was no answer to this. Thompson knew it. Richter knew it. The war gave you impossible choices and judged you by which impossibility you chose. On January 17, 1941, everything changed. Thompson received intelligence through his MI5 liaison. A German spy operating in Mayfair had been compromised. Description matched Richter's height, build, gait. Orders were to observe, identify, arrest. The net was closing. Thompson had 3 days. After that, MI5 would move regardless of what he did or didn't report. He met Richter on January 18 at a cinema in Leicester Square. They sat in the back row while a propaganda film about the Royal Air Force played to a half-empty theater. "They know about you," Thompson said without preamble. "MI5 has your description. They're watching the boarding houses in Soho. You have 48 hours. Maybe less." Richter didn't react. Just kept watching the screen where Spitfires shot down Messerschmitts in heroic formations. "How certain are they?" he asked finally. "Certain enough to deploy surveillance teams. Not certain enough to raid yet. They want to observe your contacts first. Build a network." "There are no contacts. I work alone." "I know. But they don't." On screen, British pilots celebrated victory while stirring music swelled. In the theater, audience members applauded. "You could run," Thompson said. "Tonight. I can get you to Liverpool. A neutral ship leaves for Portugal in 3 days. From there you could reach Switzerland. My mother would be dead either way. If you're arrested, the Gestapo will assume you were turned. They'll execute her for having a traitor son. If you disappear, they'll assume the same thing. She's lost either way. But at least if you run, you live." Richter turned to look at Thompson. "Why are you doing this?" "Because you're the only person who tells me the truth. Because in 18 months of war, our conversations are the only thing that feels real. Because if I let them arrest you, I become complicit in your execution, and I've had enough of watching men die for doing their duty." Thompson said none of this. "Because it's the right thing." "Is it?" Richter's voice was sharp. "I'm an enemy agent. I've been reporting Churchill's movements to German intelligence for 6 months. If those reports had reached the right people at the right time, they could have killed him. Does helping me escape sound like the right thing, detective? You haven't killed anyone. I've enabled others to kill. That's the same thing." They sat in silence while the film's triumphant ending played out. When the lights came up, Thompson stood to leave. Richter caught his arm. "Thank you," Richter said, "for the warning. But I'm not running. You'll be arrested." "I know. They'll hang you. Probably." "Then why?" "Because running means my mother dies for certain. Staying means there's a chance they'll question me, use me, turn me. Maybe that keeps her alive a little longer. Maybe it doesn't. But it's the only chance she has." Thompson understood. When all your choices are impossible, you choose the impossibility that saves someone else. "I can't protect you from MI5, Thompson said. "I know. I'm not asking you to." "Then what are you asking?" Richter stood, straightened his coat. "Remember that I wasn't a monster. That I was just a man doing an impossible job in an impossible time. That's all." They shook hands. Thompson felt the firmness of Richter's grip, recognized it as a goodbye. "I'll remember," Thompson said. They left the cinema separately. Thompson went to protect Churchill. Richter went to wait for arrest. 3 days later, MI5 raided the boarding house on Greek Street. Richter was taken into custody without resistance. Thompson never saw him again. Klaus Richter was not hanged. Instead he was turned. The process took 4 months. MI5 moved him to Camp 020 in southwest London, a Victorian mansion converted into an interrogation center. They put him in a cell with a chair, a bed, and a window that looked onto a garden. No torture. No violence. Just questions. The interrogators were professionals. They knew about his mother in Dresden, his sister in Hamburg. They knew about Sarah who fled to America. They knew about his meetings with Thompson, though they believed Thompson had been running him as an asset. Thompson neither confirmed nor denied this. Let them believe what they wanted. It kept Richter alive. The deal was simple. Richter would continue sending reports to Berlin, but the reports would now contain information MI5 wanted Germany to have. False invasion timings. Fictional troop movements. Lies dressed as intelligence. In exchange, MI5 would not contact his family, would not reveal his capture, would allow him to continue existing as a Swedish timber merchant who happened to be very helpful to British intelligence. Richter agreed. What choice did he have? For the next 3 years he sent reports to Berlin that helped defeat Germany. He became part of the Double Cross System, the network of turned German spies feeding false intelligence that made D-Day possible. His handlers said he was one of the most valuable assets in the operation. That his reporting helped save thousands of lives. That he should be proud. Richter felt nothing. Thompson learned all of this through conversations with his MI5 liaison. He never contacted Richter directly. Never visited. Never wrote. It wouldn't have been appropriate. Bodyguards don't befriend enemy spies. Even useful ones. But Thompson thought about him often. Wondered if Richter knew his reports were helping destroy the country he'd once believed in. Wondered if that made it easier or harder. Wondered if Richter remembered their conversations the way Thompson did. as the only honest thing in a war built on lies. The war ended in pieces. Italy in April, Germany in May, Japan in August. Churchill gave speeches about victory and civilization and the triumph of free peoples. Thompson stood 3 feet away, scanning crowds for threats that no longer existed. In June 1945, Klaus Richter was released from British custody. Given papers identifying him as a Swedish national who had assisted British intelligence during the war. A small pension. A letter thanking him for his service. He was free to go anywhere. Except Germany. His mother had died in the Dresden firebombing February 1945. His sister had died in Hamburg during an air raid in 1943. The Gestapo hadn't killed them. Allied bombs had. Sarah was still in America. Married to a dentist in Philadelphia. She'd sent Richter one letter in 1937 telling him she was safe and asking him not to write back. He never did. There was nothing to go home to. Home no longer existed. Richter settled in London. Found work as a translator for the Allied occupation authorities. Lived in a small flat in Bloomsbury. Walked to work past bomb craters that were slowly being filled. Ate alone. Slept alone. Remembered. Thompson continued protecting Churchill until 1945, when the Prime Minister was voted out of office. After 24 years of watching one man, Thompson was reassigned to other duties. Then retired in 1946. He bought a house in Surrey. Planted a garden. Spent time with Kate and his daughters who had grown into women while he was protecting someone else's husband. It should have been enough. It wasn't. In September 1946, Thompson saw Richter on Oxford Street. They recognized each other instantly. Neither man spoke at first. Just stopped on the crowded pavement while people flowed around them. Finally Thompson said, "You're still here. Nowhere else to go. I heard about your mother. Your sister. I'm sorry." Richter nodded. Allied bombs. British and American. Probably some of the planes that Churchill sent. Ironic, isn't it? I don't know if that's the word. They stood awkwardly. Former enemies. Former something more than enemies. Neither knew what they were now. Do you regret it? Richter asked. Warning me. Helping me. Thompson thought about this. I regret that you had to make that choice. That any of us had to make those choices. But no, I don't regret helping you. Even though I was the enemy? You were never my enemy. You were a man doing an impossible job. Same as me. Richter smiled slightly. That's what I asked you to remember. I remember. They stood in silence while London rebuilt itself around them. Brick by brick. Life by life. There's a pub near here, Thompson said. The Dog and Duck on Frith Street. Do you remember it? I remember. I'm retired now. Time on my hands. If you wanted to meet for a beer sometime? Thompson let the offer hang in the air. Richter could refuse. Should refuse probably. 2 men drinking together who had been on opposite sides of the war. What would people say? But Richter didn't care what people would say. Neither did Thompson. Thursday evenings? Richter suggested. Around 7? Thursday evenings around 7. They shook hands. Then parted ways. The following Thursday they met at the Dog and Duck. Had a beer. Talked about nothing in particular. The weather. The rebuilding. How strange peace felt after 6 years of war. They continued meeting every Thursday for the next 18 years. Walter Thompson died in 1978 at the age of 86. His obituary in the Times mentioned his distinguished career with Scotland Yard, his years protecting Winston Churchill, his dedication to duty. It did not mention Klaus Richter. Richter died in 1982 at the age of 74. There was no obituary. No memorial service. Just a notation in the records office that a Swedish translator named Klaus Richter had passed away quietly in his sleep in a nursing home in Islington. His possessions fit into 2 boxes. Books mostly. Translation dictionaries. A photograph of his mother taken before the war. Letters from his sister written in 1942. Among these belongings was a small leather notebook. Inside were notes about Churchill's movements from 1940, times, locations, routes. The raw material of espionage. And underneath those notes, on the last page, a single sentence written in English. Some friendships don't make sense in wartime. That's how you know they're real. No one knew who wrote it. No one knew if Thompson ever saw it. But they met every Thursday for 18 years. 2 old men drinking beer in a pub while the world forgot who they had been. Thompson never told his family about Richter. Never explained where he went on Thursday evenings. Kate learned to stop asking. His daughters assumed it was some Scotland Yard association, some group of retired detectives reliving old cases. They were wrong. What Thompson and Richter had wasn't about the war or the cases or the duty. It was about 2 men who had seen the machinery of state turn human beings into functions, and who had chosen, briefly, dangerously, to recognize each other's humanity instead. That choice should have been simple. It was the hardest thing either man ever did. Because recognizing the humanity in your enemy means accepting that you might be wrong. That your side might not be righteous. That duty and morality sometimes point in opposite directions. It means living with complexity in a world that demands certainty. Thompson spent 24 years protecting Churchill because someone had to stop Hitler. That was true. It remained true. But truth isn't simple. And the man who stood 3 feet from Churchill for 2 decades understood something that the history books rarely mention. That wars are fought by human beings who are more than their flags, their orders, their sides. Richter sent reports to Berlin because Germany was his country and useful men don't get to quit. That was true too. But truth compounds. And the German spy who watched Churchill smoke cigars in the rain understood something that his handlers never did. That sometimes the most important thing you can do is refuse to reduce another human being to an enemy. Their Thursday meetings weren't rebellion. They were recognition. Recognition that both men had been trapped. That both had made impossible choices. That both had survived when others hadn't. Recognition that guilt doesn't disappear just because the war ends. That complicity has a long memory. That there are no clean hands in a total war. And recognition that friendship, real friendship, the kind that sees you fully and doesn't look away, is possible even in the ruins of everything you believed. The pub on Frith Street closed in 1989, became a coffee shop, then a mobile phone store. Now it's luxury flats that rent for £3,000 a month. The building where Richter lived was demolished in 1995. A hotel stands there now. Glass and steel. Anonymous. Churchill's papers are preserved in Cambridge. Tens of thousands of documents recording every movement, every decision, every word. Thompson appears in some of them. My shadow, Churchill called him. Richter appears in none of them. MI5 destroyed most of the double cross system records in the 1950s. What remains is fragmentary. Richter's name appears twice. No details. No explanation of what he did or why it mattered. History prefers clarity. Heroes and villains. Good wars and necessary wars. Stories that make sense. But Thompson and Richter understood what history forgets. That war is experienced by human beings whose lives don't fit into clean narratives. That sometimes the most profound act of resistance is simply refusing to hate the person you're supposed to hate. That duty and morality can pull in opposite directions, and choosing between them doesn't make you a hero or a traitor. It just makes you human. They never resolved this. Never found a way to reconcile what they had done with what they believed. Never achieved peace with their choices. They just met every Thursday, drank beer, talked about small things, and remembered that once, in the darkest years of the 20th century, a British bodyguard and a German spy had looked at each other across an impossible divide and seen not an enemy, just another man trying to survive the machine. That recognition didn't change history, didn't shorten the war, didn't save lives or prevent atrocities, but it did one thing that matters more than any of that. It reminded them they were human. And sometimes, in a world that demands you become a function, remembering your humanity is the most revolutionary act possible. The rain still falls on Piccadilly. The bombers are long gone. London has been rebuilt twice over. But on certain Thursday evenings, when the light hits the buildings just right and the crowds thin out and the city remembers what it used to be, you can almost see them. 2 old men walking toward a pub that no longer exists. To talk about things that can't be spoken. To remember what history forgot. That enemies are just people who might have been friends in a different world. And friendship, real friendship, doesn't ask if you deserve it. It just sees you, fully, without judgment, and says, I know what you did. I know what you are. And I choose to sit beside you anyway. That's what remains when everything else burns away. Not victory. Not righteousness. Not the certainty that you were on the right side. Just the quiet knowledge that once, briefly, someone saw you as more than your duty. And that was enough.